Hey guys, welcome back to Cooking in College. This week, to start 2021 off right, we're gonna do one of my favorite recipes, dill chicken. So let's get started. So what you're gonna need is you're gonna want mustard powder, some dill wheat. You can get the real stuff or this dried stuff. Either works. You're gonna want some heavy whipping cream, butter, some sort of high smoke point oil, like vegetable or avocado, salt, pepper, and obviously you're gonna want a chicken breast. So the first thing, when it comes to cooking chicken, if you look at it real quick, you'll notice that one side tends to be thinner than this big side up here. So what we're gonna wanna do is pound this chicken out and get it even throughout. Because if you don't do that, what's gonna end up happening is this end down here is gonna be overcooked by the time that this piece is at the perfect temperature, or by the time you cook down here, this up here is still gonna be raw, and you really don't want that. So what you're gonna do, you're gonna take some sort of plastic bag and just put the chicken in there, and then whatever kind of like pounding instrument you have, you know, rolling pin, empty wine bottle, you have a meat mallet, you know, anything like that. Get this out of the way. You're just gonna want to pound on it until it's about an even thickness throughout. The whole time you're kind of trying to take the meat that's up here and push it down this way. That's not actually gonna happen, but nothing that I describe in the kitchen is actually what's going on, but that's just an easy way to remember it. Okay, so now that we have our chicken pounded out to an even thickness across the board, get a plate out again real quick. You're just gonna want to pat the chicken dry all over. And that's gonna help our seasoning stick to it. So what you're gonna start with is your mustard powder. And do that on both sides. Then we're gonna add our dill on. Then as always, we're gonna add some salt. Just a little bit this time, because that dill and that mustard powder is gonna be pretty strong. And then your black pepper. So what you're gonna wanna do next is get your pan preheated. For this recipe, I'm gonna put in a little bit of oil. And then on top of that, I'm also going to add butter. The butter is gonna do is it's gonna add a nice richness to the chicken as we cook it. And the combination of oil and butter is gonna keep the butter from burning. It's also gonna help the chicken avoid burning. I'm just gonna add 2 little knobs of butter. It doesn't really matter how much. It's all up to personal preference. But we're gonna get that going and let that melt down before we put the chicken in. So now that this is preheated and ready to go, we're gonna add our chicken in. It's not really sizzling, but that's fine. We're gonna give it about 30 seconds each time until it reaches an internal temperature of 165 degrees. The best way to do that is check it with some sort of meat thermometer. So every 30 seconds or so, you're gonna turn it until it gets a nice golden crust on it, and that's when you're gonna start checking for temperature. So real quick, I just checked the temperature because we're starting to get a crust forming on there, a nice golden brown crust. It came out to about 130, so we're gonna need a little bit longer. When it comes to cooking time, it's really gonna depend on what stove you have, what pan you have, because a stainless steel, a non-stick, and a cast iron are all gonna conduct heat differently. And it also depends on how big the piece of chicken you're cooking is. This one, we have a pretty good sized piece of chicken, so it's gonna take a little bit longer. And anytime you temp it with a thermometer like this one, you want to make sure that you always go into the middle of the chicken. So don't just poke it in down here at the little edge. You want to make sure you get deep in there so you know what it's like in the middle. That's where it's going to take the longest to cook. You're going to want it at 165 degrees. That's really important, because with red meats like beef, you can kind of undercook it a little bit and you'll be okay. That's why you have your rare, medium, that. But with poultry like chicken and turkey, if you don't cook it to 165 degrees, you risk getting salmonella, and that's pretty bad. I'm not sure if it can kill you, but I don't want to find out, and I don't want you to find out and tell me, so just get it to 165 degrees for me. Oh, you started to burn. That's a bad girl. If it starts to burn on the outside, the crust starts to burn, but you're still raw in the middle, what you're going to want to do is lower your heat and find some way to cover the chicken, whether that's with a lid or with tin foil or something like that. So you lower the heat so you stop that burning, and then the covering keeps the heat trapped in there, so that heat, that radiant heat, is going to cook the inside of the chicken without burning the outside. Alright, cool. We just came up at 165 degrees on this, so we're going to pull it off and let it rest. And now, with what's left in the pan, don't turn your heat off, you're going to lower it down to medium. And we're going to grab probably a chunk of butter. There's no particular measurement, just however much you feel like you want. I like butter, so I'm going to do what we call a chunk, which is about this big. But you can just use a couple tablespoons, whatever you feel like. I'm just gonna melt that down in there real quick. In the same pan with everything that's left over from the chicken. Do not clean out your pan before this, that's important. We want those leftover pieces from the chicken. It's gonna give the sauce a really nice flavor. Okay, now that our butter is melted, you're gonna take your cream, and I'd say add just enough to cover the bottom of the pan. And you're gonna want to start to get that mixed in there with your butter and oil and your good chicken pieces. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna add some dill into the pan with the cream and the butter. And I'm also going to add a little bit of mustard powder, not as much as I did the dill, just a dash. And you're going to start mixing that up. as you're mixing this, make sure you scrape along the bottom of the pan and get any stuck pieces of chicken. You want to get those up. It's what we call fond. You're going to want to bring the sauce to a nice rolling simmer, and from here, you're going to keep mixing it and give it some time to reduce down. And in that reducing process, what's eventually going to end up happening is the sauce is going to thicken up and become gloopier. And the way you want to know that it's done is you'll be able to put a spoon in it and then run a whisk or a fork or something across the back of the spoon and it leaves a clean line. That's how you know your sauce is thick enough. This whole time you are whisking or mixing constantly. I'm going to add a little pinch of salt here and a couple cracks of black pepper. Now we're at this rolling simmer. I'm going to crank my heat up to high and just speed up that reduction process. Something important that you want to avoid when you're making this sauce, or any sauce in general, is you don't want the sauce to break. What I mean by the sauce breaking is what will happen is that the butter will separate from the other ingredients in the sauce. The way you want to avoid that is start it on medium-low heat, mix everything together that way, and once that's all mixed together properly, then you bring it up to high to reduce it. So now we're going to check it real quick. So here, we've got it on the back of the spoon. Drag a fork through it and you see how it leaves that clean line. The sauce doesn't all run together. That's our indicator that this sauce is good. So now we're going to kill the heat. Put these over here. Pull it off and keep mixing it for a little bit while the sauce cools down. While it's cooling down, I like to add just a little bit more dill and mustard powder. It just gives it a nice little bite on the very top of the sauce. And remember, you want to taste this as you're making it, because once it's on the plate and on the chicken, you can't change how it tastes. That's good. Okay, so now we're gonna plate up. So if you're boring, you can just put the chicken on the plate, throw the sauce on top of that. We're not, so we're gonna make it look pretty. We're gonna slice the chicken along the bias here. So we've got our chicken cut onto the plate. Space it out a little bit so your guests can see that it's cooked properly. And then we're going to take a spoon, pour that sauce over the top. And then my little secret, dried parsley flakes. Make it look pretty. And there you go. Weeknight, weekend dinner, it'll impress anyone. You already know how to make the mashed potatoes and pair with this as a side. Pair some roasted broccoli with it too. You got an amazing date night dinner. Or just whenever you're bored and hungry. Now, taste test. Thanks for coming to see Cooking in College. I'll be back next week. But right now, I need some alone time with this.